Hey now, we are getting over, and I am the Silver King, Adam Silverstein, here to lead you through these hard times. With your 2025 NXT Vengeance Day instant analysis. That's right, Getting Over is back once again, and we are here just minutes after NXT Vengeance Day went off the air to break down everything that happened on that brand's first premium live event of 2025. This also happens to be the 700th episode of the Getting Over Wrestling Podcast. No special celebration today. We're going to save that for 750, which is still multiple months away. But nevertheless, we are excited to bring you this edition of Performance Enhancing Audio. As we enter the program, allow the Silver King to remind you that Getting Over
is all about Defy.
So head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. As you can tell, the Silver King, while perhaps still under the weather and not sounding 100%, the sore throat is gone, so there's no Ricola drops in my mouth while I'm recording this. At least I have a little bit more energy than I did at the beginning of the week, but I'll tell you, this is the first time I've had a legitimate head cold. I think since before the pandemic, I've only had COVID since then. And it's weird to have a regular cold, but we're getting through it. No rest for the weary, as they say. We have an absolute ton to discuss here. Of course, we're going to break down every single match from NXT Vengeance Day. We're also going to move it forward, discuss what all of this means for the future of NXT. We will have grades on every individual match. Of course, we will also have grades on the entire show. And all of you are Getting Overheads. You got an opportunity to vote and share both your pre-show grade and your post-show grade on social media. At Getting Overcast on Twitter, at Getting Over on Blue Sky, and we will refer to your grades as well to see whether we agree or disagree about the quality of NXT Vengeance Day. By the way, you can follow us on those social media accounts for episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, and all of that good stuff. Also, do not forget to subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Not only do you get audio from all of our episodes, we are posting interview clips as well, and we will have full long-form video interviews for you in 2025. So let's not waste any more time. Let's get to the NXT Vengeance Day instant analysis. 2 quick notes off the top. First, the women main evented the show. It has been a long time coming for NXT. It was actually the first ever main event for Roxanne Perez, despite the fact that on Saturday night, she set the record for most PLE appearances at NXT events by a woman. And yet this was her first main event. Tells you how long of a time this was coming. Also, I wanted to shout out this Washington, D.C. crowd. They were phenomenal. The venue, I believe, was sold out, around 4,000 tickets. They were loud from the opening bell through the end of the show. And if any recent NXT PLE deserved a crowd like this, it was Vengeance Day. So perhaps that's a little bit of a spoiler in terms of what our final grade for this show will be. Let's kick it off where Vengeance Day ended. The main event, the NXT Women's Championship, Julia defending against Bayley, Roxanne Perez, and Cora Jade in a fatal 4-way match. Perez and Jade got a segment of time before Julia booted both of them. She had a weird botch with Bayley. The faces and heels teamed up, but Cora seemed to purposely catch Roxy with a pump knee. Jade did a huge dive outside, only for Perez to get her revenge. Bayley then hit a wheelbarrow cutter on Roxy with Cora's help. Basically, it was the Metagirl's finisher. She took out the heels with a double draping stunner, but ate a Northern Lights suplex from Julia. Bayley and Julia botched again on an octopus hold into a crucifix bomb. Really weird. Julia put Perez in an STF, countered into a crossface. Bayley did a twisting sidewalk slam on Cora and a sunset flip powerbomb into the turnbuckles on Julia. Cora prevented pop rocks on Bayley with a pump knee to Cora. Then she hit Bayley with her double underhook DDT finisher for a broken fall by Roxy. In a huge Tower of Doom spot, Julia did a butterfly suplex on Roxy as Bayley simultaneously hit a belly to back on Julia, and Cora took out Bayley with a powerbomb from underneath. Bayley ate pop rocks ringside and inside the ring for a broken fall by Jade, who got a false finish on a crucifix before hitting her finisher, which was broken up by Arrivederci. Julia then took Perez out with Arrivederci and a Northern Lights bomb to retain her title in 18 minutes. Now, the first 7 to 8 minutes of this, it did leave a decent amount to be desired. The final 10 to 11 minutes was an A. In total, an excellent four-way, an appropriate main event for the show, even if it was not the best match of the evening. There was a ton of storytelling, both with Roxy and Cora getting in one another's way, as well as Roxy and Bayley continuing their individual feud. The shock of all shockers, I mentioned it twice, was Bayley and Julia having arguably the worst chemistry out of the entire bunch. Now, that might be circumstantial because they haven't worked together before. It also might be because Bayley has attended 4 events and been in as many cities in 6 days. So that would make a lot of sense that she's exhausted and perhaps was not at the top of her game. But despite both of those concessions, it was nevertheless surprising. Bayley took an absolute beating in this match, and I know this term gets used a lot, but she really deserves her flowers. As I just said, 4 cities in 6 days, 3 matches, and a basketball game in that span. And let me just say, by the way, a quick pause. She got jobbed in that NBA All-Star Celebrity Game. I don't know how many minutes she played. I think she entered once and played like 3 or 4 minutes. I don't know if she touched the ball. It was an absolute joke. She was excited to be there. I'm sure it was a great experience. I'm sure at the end of the day, she's happy. But, I mean, those teams sucked, and she can actually play. It was immensely frustrating as a viewer who tuned in specifically for her to basically not see her get any run. So I was pretty pissed off about that. But like I said, she has been an absolute workhorse for WWE. Perez sold her ass off during and after this match. She was probably the MVP of the outing. Jade hung right with the other 3 women. She's clearly and consistently improving after coming back from injury. It's great to see that. Julia's an interesting case because she has a great look. She can wrestle extremely well. Her character is believable. Something is not clicking 100% all of the way, such as it has with Stephanie Vaquer. She will absolutely get there. It just feels like there's a speed bump she still needs to overcome, and I cannot exactly put my finger on what it is. This was the toughest match to grade the entire night. I'm going to say 3.75 stars B+. Really, really good. Just a bit too clunky to be considered excellent, especially compared with what else was on this card. Sometimes when you're doing match grades, I mean, you always try to look at them in a vacuum of what they are individually, but when you're watching a show and you're comparing one match to another that you just saw minutes earlier, you can't, you say to yourself, well, I can't give it the same grade. It wasn't as good as that, right? And that does factor in. It's why match grades are so individualized and it's so tough to carry over from one show to the next. It's also why we give so few 5-star A+ grades to matches, because they really should be few and far between. And when you have an incredible match on one show, you can say, wow, that stood out from everything else, but it doesn't mean that it was truly the best of the best over the course of a year, over the course of 5 years, 10 years, whatever the case might be. But this was the proper main event, and it did deliver in its spot. Coming out of this, I'm still expecting Bayley and Perez at Stand and Deliver. A lot of people are jumping to the conclusion that Roxy's getting called up. I mean, she certainly might. She is in an Elimination Chamber qualifier Monday on Raw. I just don't see it happening in full until after Stand and Deliver at the earliest. The Bayley match could happen at Roadblock, but saving it for WrestleMania weekend makes sense if Bayley does not have a major main roster match. You could say, well, they could put it on WrestleMania. I mean, they could, but Roxy would be a rookie on that show. That doesn't make sense. And she could do double duty, Bayley on the WrestleMania card, and then Cora Jade, let's say, on the Stand and Deliver card. But that would be a lot for her to do all at the same time. And don't forget, Stand and Deliver is an important show. So getting someone like Bayley on it, if she has nothing to do for WrestleMania, that is key. But as I said, there's also her feud with Jade when it comes to Roxy. That needs to run its course as well. Maybe it's a loser leaves town type of situation. There's plenty more for Roxy to do in NXT for at least 2 months, if not longer. I'd personally wait to call her up until SummerSlam, but you all know I advocate for talent to stay in NXT longer than many fans want them to. It's the way I felt about Braun Breaker. I was right when it came to Braun. I think I would be right when it comes to Roxy as well. There's probably contractual issues to consider. If she's coming near the end, you want to call her up and get her to resign and not have her think, well, they're not going to call me up anytime soon. Maybe I should leave, right? So there's a lot of different things to consider. But I'm just saying from a booking standpoint alone, she has the Bayley feud and the Cora feud. I'd let those run their course before I called her up to the main roster. I'd probably do it at some point either between WrestleMania and SummerSlam, or I would do it after SummerSlam. Normally, we would go to the co-main event, which was the NXT Championship match, but we're actually going to tie together the women's matches and the men's matches on the show, and you will understand why by the time we get through them. So NXT Vengeance Day actually opened with the North American Championship on the line. Fallon Henley defending against Stephanie Vaquer. Vaquer got an awesome Titantron featuring her horns and loud chants at the bell, and really loud chants throughout the entire match. Lots of mat wrestling early, with Fallon countering the thigh driller by rolling outside. Fatal Influence got a distraction of the referee that led to shots on Vaquer, plus a jump-off blockbuster by Henley, who dominated for most of the match. Stephanie came back with a 619 springboard missile dropkick and the thigh driller. Vaquer hit Eat the Feet, kind of no-sold by Henley, plus a dragon suplex and a meteora. Fallon answered with a pump handle exploder suplex, and she got another assisted punch from JC Jane. Steph scouted another jump off and took out the heels ringside. Then she hit a double underhook codebreaker basically on the ring apron, plus a springboard splash onto the heels. Vaquer added SVB, but she didn't cover. Instead, she dragged Henley to the corner and hit Spiral Tap to become the new North American champion. This woman, Esta Chica, is on another level. This was an absolute banger. It showcased exactly why Vaquer is one of the best in the world and why Henley has been ready for the main roster for at least 6 months. Simply could not have asked for a better start to this show. Even though going with Vaquer as champion makes all the sense in the world, I was a bit surprised, just given the numbers advantage and the fact that they easily could have saved this for Stand and Deliver. They must have a big match in mind for that show. Given how massively over Stephanie was during this match, though, striking while the iron is hot and strapping her up is really tough to argue against. Outside of Joshi's, who I simply am not able to watch with enough regularity to properly rate them as overall wrestlers, I would say Stephanie is a top 3 women's wrestler in the world, but let's say North America right now. When you consider the way she can go in the ring, and on that alone, just her wrestling, she might seriously be the best women's wrestler in North America. 4 stars, A-. This got 14 minutes. If they got 20 or more with a false finish or 2 added, it's an A match. No doubt about it. Loved that she went to her extra finisher, given it was a title match. Nice touch to that. Best match of Henley's career, probably Vaquer's best singles match in NXT to this point. And by the way, commentary called her the first South American-born champion in WWE history. That is false. No. Ezekiel Jackson was born in Guyana. And if NXT counts, then WWE ECW counts as well. So she's the second ever South American-born champion. But she's also the first in 15 years, and that is still important. What's really cool is WWE today has an active champion from every continent, obviously except Antarctica. That is absolutely wild. Now, the reason we paired these women's matches together is because after Julia retained the NXT Women's Championship in the main event, Vaquer entered the ring with her newly won championship, and they celebrated together. But she kept her eye on the NXT title. The shot of them holding up those straps together was fantastic. It's going to be used on video packages for years down the line. And then, as the title cards were going by, Jordynne Grace's music hit. They did a 3-way confrontation, and NXT Vengeance Day ended with holy shit chants. It was nothing more than that, because Grace presumably is going to be a face. But it was enough. Seeing all 3 of them in the ring together, basically the new 4 horsewomen of NXT. You can throw in Zarya as the 4th. You could throw in, potentially Roxanne Perez in that spot. You could throw in someone like Jada Parker, who's a burgeoning talent. I mean, it'll depend. They could also just not be 4. It could be a trio, right? But I'd say Zarya, if I had to put anyone in there. Them being the next generation of major women's talent in NXT, it just goes to prove right what they continue to say. This legitimately is the best women's division in the world right now. And it is wild to see that happen in such a short period of time on this brand. I mean, it's been developing over the years, don't get me wrong. But with these acquisitions and the talent that they're developing, the Jada Parkers, the Sol Rukas, obviously Roxanne Perez and Cora Jade, and others that have been there. Fallon Henley, I mentioned, has been fantastic. I mean, there's no shortage of major women's talent in NXT, most of which you could put on the main roster tomorrow and they'd be ready for prime time. But of course, they can't all get up there right away. Now, moving over to the men, we're actually going to start with the tag team championships. Fraxium defending against Josh Briggs and Yoshiki Inamura. There was a pre-show backstage moment with Fraxium getting excited about their future, deciding to cement themselves as the best tag team in the world, maybe the greatest of all time. It was actually cool seeing them come together like that. Nice team building segment, which we actually don't get that much from Fraxium because they've been frayed so often in their storyline. Now, this was second on the card. Briggs had a strange skull on his leather vest. I don't want to say it was the first time, but Fraxium had their most coordinated gear and Titantron that I can remember. Inamura was great with some sumo moves and chops, but Axiom took him down out of nowhere with Golden Ratio. Nathan Frazier got a hot tag and went so fast, he didn't get all of a move off the ropes, accidentally booting Briggs right in the face. He took an extra big powerbomb as a receipt, which candidly was deserved. The challengers combined for a backdrop catch Liger bomb, which was an awesome spot. Axiom stopped Inamura's unique splash, catching him on the ropes for a Spanish fly. Briggs stopped Frazier's Phoenix splash on the top rope, grabbing him for an avalanche chokeslam into Axiom. Briggs leveled Axiom with a lariat. Inamura hit a fall-away slam without actually falling. Axiom took out Briggs with a poison rana. Inamura had 2 spinning spots with the champions. This dude is wild. He even got chants from the crowd. Fraxium avoided his splash and then took out Briggs ringside before hitting a new finisher, a missile dropkick high-low to retain the titles, handshake after the bell. Holy shit. Back-to-back banger matches to start this show. This was nonstop. It was almost impossible to pick an MVP, though it seriously might have been Inamura. He was exceptional and brought some truly unique offense to what we are used to seeing in America and in WWE. I love the way Fraxium was booked in that they were never really in danger, yet the challengers got plenty of offense and proved capable of not only winning the match, but being champions. This was a totally different match than the opener, and it was immensely different than really anything else on the card. That was one cool thing about Vengeance Day. Every single match on this card completely stood on their own. None of them were similar to each other. And the booking for all of them individually was largely interesting and largely correct across the board. The intensity for me bumped this up to an A, 4.25 stars. I actually have it as the match of the night on first watch. I'm going to watch the entirety of Vengeance Day again. I'm just being candid about it. I'm probably going to do it on Sunday. I want to see this entire card with fresh eyes. Hopefully when I'm feeling better in the morning, I might tweak some of these grades, but they're all in this very similar category, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. I had 2 thoughts coming out of this match. 1, Briggs needs to have a legit singles run in NXT, at least for the North American title. This dude is totally ready and has been since he returned from Japan. He has Kevin Nash, but actually athletic vibes. Whatever he does just works. And given he was the last Evolve champion, I wonder if they restart the belt on that show, maybe you let him be champion off the bat or let him compete in that first match and win the championship back and work on that show as champion and simultaneously work on NXT in this tag team with Inamura or doing whatever he does on NXT. Number 2, I'm not a huge fan of the Fraxium finisher. It's better than many tag team finishers that exist. Don't get me wrong. But you all know, longtime listeners, I find high-low tag team finishers to be trite. Everyone does them. They're very similar to one another, and they're just boring. This was that, but with a missile dropkick instead of a regular dropkick. I don't know why you wouldn't do this with Golden Ratio, which is literally Axiom's finisher, but I also like the combination of doing Golden Ratio and Phoenix Splash and both of them hitting their finishers. It's nice that they have another one in their repertoire, but this feels more like a setup move for them because of their skill and ability than an actual finisher. They're capable of so much more and so much better than this. So, I'm not saying it ruined the match or that all of a sudden it makes them a bad tag team. I know they can, and I have seen them do better. And, falling down to a missile dropkick high-low, it's just like, big men can do that. I want something that these high-energy athletic dudes can do that's special. You know what I mean? Now, just as these teams shook hands after the bell, the teased faction for the last couple of weeks, they debuted wearing all black with bandanas around their mouths, a look we've seen a million times before. They destroyed all 4 guys, immediately dipped out, and fans chanted, "Who are you?" This left a lot to be desired. It was not only immensely formulaic, we didn't even get a chance to look at the guys standing next to each other, flexing, whatever the case. Cameras didn't even get a great shot of the biggest spot, which was like a tackle through the barricade. And really the worst part of all of it is that it was so chaotic that it just came across as sloppy. They also did a move where like they took two of the tag team guys, I think it was Fraxium, but it could have been any pair, and just threw them into each other in midair. That's really dangerous and should not be done. It came across as way too generic to be impactful, way too weak overall. I'm going to put a pin in this here, though, and you'll understand why in a moment. The NXT Championship was on the line. Oba Femi defending against Austin Theory and Grayson Waller in a triple threat. This was the co-main event. The heels double-teamed early and often, though Femi got them coming back. Oba chopped the life out of Theory when he flew at him ringside, then just chucked him into the steel steps. Or I should say, let me correct that. Chucked the steel steps into his face, which of course is much cooler. Waller used a chair on Femi, but ate a sidewalk slam into it. Femi wound up on Theory's shoulders, but grabbed Waller off the top for a superplex electric chair combo. Grayson flew off the ropes for an elbow drop through a table ringside. It took a while for the heels to finally get into it with one another. Oba ran Austin into his partner, hit a spine buster. He kicked the chair out of Waller's hands and toss slammed him through the announce table. Femi then punched a chair out of Theory's hands, but he ate a DDT counter to fall from grace. Theory then hit him with A-Town down, but Waller pulled the referee out of the ring at the last half second. Fans chanted, "Turn on Grayson." They argued with Femi catching Theory for the toss slam. Waller rolled in to hit Oba. Instead, he took out Theory with the rolling cutter. Femi then drilled him with fall from grace and retained the title, pinning Grayson. Chef's kiss for the pacing and this match booking in terms of the way these spots were executed and the ways in which Theory and Waller interacted. It was all Waller screwing Theory, but clearly none of it was actually on purpose. Still, Grayson has been the instigator in their team for their entire run, and that did not change in this match. Oba, he got his fair share of opportunities to look dominant, taking down the guys 2-on-1, but they also got plenty of offense against him, both together and individually, especially Theory. I appreciated that Theory basically had him beat, if not for the Waller interference, and with Grayson taking the fall, it actually protected Austin. If the main roster crowd can buy into this team fracturing the same way NXT fans have, Theory could be a big-time babyface. And it makes me wonder if this might actually happen in NXT with them staying in NXT, which you know is something I wanted. 4 stars A-. It was extremely difficult to parse the quality of matches on the show. As I said a moment ago, you could argue between 4.25 stars A and 3.75 stars B+ for probably 3 or 4 different matches on this card. And just to reiterate, I stand by the point I've made on our other shows. I want to expand on it just a little bit. Theory getting a run with the NXT Championship would be a tremendous move for his career, and it would simultaneously help this men's division in a major way. What you do is you have Theory go over Femi somehow, and then you have Ricky Starks over Theory 6 months down the line. Talk about completely rebuilding your men's division. That's what the Silver King would do if he had the pencil. Now, as Femi was celebrating his title retention after the bell, the lights went out with spotlights finding the 4 members of the new faction in the crowd. The lights kind of vibrated as their music hit. Then they went out as the guys stormed the ring and completely took out Femi 4-on-1. There was even a toss-catch bomb to lay him flat on the canvas with 4 guys standing tall in the middle of the ring together. Now, backstage, Ava had no answer for this. She's like, "I'll just deal with this another time." What a weak-ass GM. Your champion just got taken out. 2 sets of champions, him and your tag team champions, got taken out. And you're like, I'll deal with that on Tuesday. Not that big of a deal. Like, what are we doing here? That said, this attack on Femi was far, far better and way, way more impactful than the opening attack. And it was another example of Shawn Michaels getting the best of us as viewers. He totally took us for a ride, with this group leaving us disappointed to start and then delivering the exact type of moment I was hoping to get later in the show. I wrote the note that I said earlier, just a couple minutes ago, when I was watching that tag team match. I wish they stood tall and were together and we got to see them. And that's literally what they did about an hour later on this program. Let's go ahead and move to Trick Williams versus Eddie Thorpe in a strap match. The crowd was obviously on fire for Trick. There were even "F you Eddie" chants. It was mostly a typical WWE strap match. Williams hit a bookend and locked in STF with the strap. Thorpe nearly tapped twice but reached the ropes. Then Trick whooped that trick with the strap. He hit 2 flapjacks plus trick shot with Eddie rolling outside. Williams missed another trick shot. The strap got caught between his legs, so Thorpe used it for a low blow and then basically hit a Bzaiku knee and got the shocking upset win. The biggest surprise, really, of the entire night. I loved the booking here, and I loved the crowd response. Utter shock, loud booing, total distaste for Thorpe. The match was quality. It was actually one of Trick's better bouts recently. Really, the only part I didn't like was Thorpe just winning with a running knee instead of something more impactful like Manifest Destiny, his finisher, or any of the other moves that he does as signatures. He could have done the exact same sequence and added one more move, which would have made Williams look even stronger in defeat because it took that much to take him down. That's not his finisher, and because of that, it's a shitty way for Trick to just go down. A low blow is a low blow, though, in WWE. It's meant to be impactful, and they treat it as such, which you don't necessarily see in other organizations where they do a low blow and they can just kind of continue with matches. So, the fact that WWE is consistent in that regard is, of course, positive. I just think it would have been more appropriate for Williams to lose with a finisher, given he's a 2-time champion. But Eddie's character badly needed this win to be legitimized. In retrospect, you could have called this match a must-win for him. I'm surprised I really didn't think of it that way on the Ultimate Preview, though I am sick, so I'm going to give myself a break. Trick facing some actual adversity, really for the first time, that's important. And it was just nice for a heel to win clean in a situation like this for a change. That does not happen often in NXT. 3.25 stars B. I have this as the quote-unquote worst match of the night, but it was not bad. I mean, it's a B. That's still a high-quality match. It just did pale in comparison to pretty much everything else on the card. We had Javon Evans against Ethan Page. Evans was wild at the bell, hitting a crazy tope suicida into the announce table, throwing a monitor, splashing Page off the table, hitting a blue thunder bomb, and delivering a springboard cutter on the ring apron. He was wearing an extremely visible mouthguard, which was a smart touch. Evans tried to stomp Page's head into the steel steps, but he avoided it and trapped the face's foot in the steps, hitting a dropkick and extensively working that joint. Ethan picked him off the top rope for Ego's Edge and a false finish. Evans responded with some haymakers and his rebound spin kick. Then he stomped the front of Page's head, and he added a tope con hero, off one leg, by the way, because he was still selling it. But as he tried his springboard cutter, Page caught him midair, punched him right in the jaw, knocked out his mouth guard, and then hit his version of Twist of Fate for the win. Evans sold his jaw after the bell, even bit on a blood capsule to take it further. And as was the case with Trick and Eddie, I loved the booking here. My predictions were that NXT would have Vengeance Day be formulaic from the standpoint of its winners and losers. Evans at age 20 did not need to immediately overcome Page. Ethan's a veteran. He outsmarted him, and ultimately he out-wrestled him. Plus, Javon was so fueled by rage and blinded by it at points in this match, including what led to his foot getting injured in the steps, that it made complete sense for him to lose and put himself in a position where he wasn't going to immediately overcome his chief rival. This was a perfect way to continue the feud, and I'm glad it's being done this way as opposed to Evans just winning and moving on. I also enjoyed how Javon kind of represented the vengeance on the card. This kid was out for blood the entire match. I loved the storytelling bell to bell, and if you check on social media, they actually posted a video of a phone call he had with his mom before the show, where she was basically convincing him not to wrestle in the match, asking him if there's any way he can get out of it. And he was acting all hard, Mama, I got it. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. So that was like a beautiful touch on top of it all. 4 stars, A-. There was a taped promo from Ricky Starks saying he was watching Vengeance Day live and would sign his official contract on Tuesday. Throughout the pre-show and Vengeance Day itself, his name was never once uttered. I'm still working under the assumption they just had to complete legal paperwork to get the trademark on his name. We'll find out on Tuesday. Perhaps he switches it up a bit, changes his name. I just don't see why they would do that when so many other people have kept their names. Maybe he wants a fresh start. I don't know. Ricky Starks is a damn good name. I'd be shocked if they change it. Stacks at the Italian restaurant said D'Angelo family should have seen Izzy Dame's turn and the Sean Spears weirdo attack coming. He said Tony D's back is messed up, but the heels need to pay for their sins, and he's going to step up to do it on Tuesday. The camera zoomed out. He was not actually speaking to the family. He was just talking to himself. It was actually pretty solid. Stacks is coming into his own as a character. It's nice to see him getting more opportunities as a featured player, given he's been a secondary for so long in D'Angelo family. And lastly, Ariana Grace returned to NXT. She found Ava backstage, thanking her for allowing Ariana to be the liaison for NXT over in TNA the last few months. Ariana's been injured, by the way. That's worth pointing out, one of the reasons why she did that. Suddenly, she introduced Santino Marella, her father, who talked about knowing Ava when she was a baby. Ava kind of acted like, aren't you guys related to each other? But she didn't exactly say it. But Santino got a huge reaction from the crowd. It was great to see him there. They decided to have a conversation, presumably about that NXT TNA deal I wrote about on buymeacoffee.com/gettingover that all of you can sign up and read. Speaking of,
I happen to love the number 5.
and I hope you do as well, because for $5 a month, $50 for the entire year, you can become an official Getting Overhead. Just visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up. You'll get bonus audio, the fastest 5 minutes in professional wrestling, instant reactions to every major show. Imagine an instant analysis like this, but condensed in 5 minutes. You get that after every major TV show, and you get exclusive news analysis posts every single week. You get that from buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. So that wraps up our instant analysis of NXT Vengeance Day. That allows us to move over to our grades segment on this show. I did forget to mention off the top, of course, the Silver King did not pop open a cold one. 2 reasons: I'm doing the show myself, and I'm sick, so consuming alcohol while taking cold medicine, probably not the best idea. But nevertheless, I digress. Let's get back to those grades. Now, on the pre-show, before this began, the Silver King expected an 89 out of 100. I gave it a B+. All of you are Getting Overheads had the opportunity to vote on Twitter at Getting Overcast, largely because Blue Sky right now does not have a poll function. And these were your percentages. 39% said it would be in the A range. 49% said it would be B+ to B. 10% B- to C+, and 2% a C or lower. That averages out to a 90.3 out of 100, so an A-. You all had a slightly higher pre-show expectation grade than the Silver King, which makes complete sense because as we talked about on the ultimate preview for this show, I told you I was right on the border of those two grades. The card looked amazing, but NXT had not necessarily been over-delivering on shows recently, so it was kind of tough to begin in the A range, especially when I did not expect there to be any title changes on the program. Of course, there did wind up being one. Now, before I give you my final grade, let's get to your final grade. And the poll is technically still open for another 20 minutes as we tape this, but your percentages came in 59% A+ to A, 31% A- to B+, 7.6% B to B-, and 2 to 3% C+ or lower. That averages out to a 94.1 out of 100, a flat A. And I kind of hate to say it, but I completely agree. It's exactly the number that I wrote down, a 94 out of 100. I thought this was an absolutely fantastic show that completely exceeded expectations. 5 out of 6 matches on this card, you could argue, were anywhere between 4.25 stars, 3.75 stars on our scale, an A to a B+, just in terms of match quality. That's not even taking into account the booking and the storytelling, the appropriate creative decisions that were made throughout the entire show. And the one match that fell short was nevertheless quality with Trick and Eddie in the strap match. And it had the appropriate finish, at least as far as I was concerned. I preferred Thorpe going over Williams. You also had Jordan Grace showing up. You had the return of Ariana Grace, the surprise of Santino Marella, and the debut of a brand new faction, which of course disappointed at first, but then completely delivered the second time they came out. So it was immensely tough to find a flaw with this show. Even the crowd was exceptional. I actually believe the crowd probably took this from an A- show to an A, just the way they put everything over. They cheered all the right people, they booed all the right people, and they were loud throughout this entire program. NXT Vengeance Day kicked off 2025 on an immensely high note for this brand. And truly, there used to be a phrase that was used in NXT, FTMF. And basically they would say that when NXT TakeOver preceded a WWE Premium Live event. It was follow that mother effers. That's what NXT used to say. They're going to need to FTMF for the rest of this year because this brand is going to have to live up to Vengeance Day for the remainder of 2025. That's how quality this show came across. So again, tough to find many flaws here. A show, on rewatch, I could even go to a 95. I'm not putting that out of the realm of possibility. It was one of the most enjoyable Premium Live events or pay-per-views I have watched start to finish in a long time. It's not saying it's necessarily the best or it had the best matches or whatever the case, but to have that much action and for every match, by the way, to get that much time and have it all happen inside of basically 2.5 hours, that is immensely tough to do. Feather in Shawn Michaels' cap. Some NXT PLEs had not completely delivered over the second half of 2024. This started off the year as strong as possible. So with all of that said, let's wrap up this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. I'm actually shocked how quickly we went through this instant analysis style because a lot did happen on this show, but I will be watching NXT Vengeance Day again. I will absolutely have a second look at this show this coming Thursday on our next NXT episode. Also on that program, we will discuss AEW Grand Slam Collision Australia, whatever the hell that show is being called, along with the following AEW Dynamite. All of that is coming on Thursday. Between now and then, we will be back on Tuesday with your next WWE episode. As I mentioned, don't forget to support this podcast financially. Visit buymeacoffee.com/gettingover. Sign up, get the bonus audio, get the news posts, all that stuff. We would greatly appreciate it. Don't forget, here at Getting Over,
It's all about the five.
so head over to Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Leave a 5-star rating on Apple. Take a little extra time. Leave a 5-star written review. If you do, we will read it live right here on the show. Subscribe to us on YouTube at Getting Overcast. Full audio episodes, video clips from our interviews, and full video interviews coming in 2025. And follow us on social media. You get to vote in the pre- and post-show polls. You get to receive episode drops, news, analysis, highlights, and all of that good stuff. You get it on Twitter at Getting Overcast, on Blue Sky at Getting Over. We would greatly appreciate all of that. Thank you all for listening to this edition of the Getting Over Wrestling podcast. This is the Silver King signing off and leaving you with just 3 final words. Bye for now.